I found the messages by accident, which is the way trouble likes to arrive. Rain wrote its thin lines on the window, and the apartment felt smaller and sharper at the same time. I was finishing a slideshow for work while my phone lay empty on the counter. He had left a few minutes earlier to meet a friend for coffee, the kind of errand that announces itself as harmless. His phone buzzed once on the table and then went still. I reached for it only to check the time, or so I told myself. The screen lit and presented a stack of notifications that did not belong to any of our shared plans. A name I did not know sat above a preview that sounded like a conversation already in motion. I did not open anything at first. I put the phone down and walked to the kitchen and poured water I did not want. Then I returned and picked it up again, and the silence in the room felt like an invitation. I unlocked the screen with the code he had given me long ago, a code shared for convenience and emergencies, not for trespass. The message thread opened to a river of words that had flowed while I cooked dinners and folded laundry and asked him about his day. There were details about a restaurant I had never heard of, a hotel lobby I had never seen, a plan called a strategy call that was not a call at all. There were lines that sounded like a relationship rehearsed in my absence. Memories formed on nights when I waited for a text that said late meeting. I scrolled slowly, as if speed could change meaning. Dates lined up with other nights I could still hold in my hand. A birthday I had spent with his family, followed by a message from him to her that said he wished he were somewhere else. A Thursday when I fell asleep on the couch, followed by a photo of a table set for two. No explicit declarations lived there, but the shape of the truth was clear even without the loudest words. I held the phone against my chest and sat very still. The rain thinned. Somewhere, a neighbor laughed in that careless way people laugh when they do not know they are serving as proof that the world continues. I put the phone back where I had found it and stared at it as if it might revise itself. When he returned, he smelled like coffee and wet wool, and a story he could tell without rehearsing. He kissed my head, and I flinched in a way only I could feel. He asked about my slideshow, and I said it was fine. He asked about dinner, and I said I was not very hungry. Later, I lay in the dark and tried to name what had changed. The bed held us the way it always had. The streetlight drew its old square on the floor. The cat circled and settled between our feet like a treaty. The only change was mine. I had information I had not meant to collect. It sat in my ribs like a visitor who had decided to stay. I told myself that morning would make the words smaller. Morning did not keep that promise. I went to work and sat in a meeting where people discussed timelines with bright conviction. I nodded and took notes and could not remember a single sentence spoken in the room. At lunch, I walked by the river and watched the water argue with the wind. I told myself I could ask directly and that asking was the right thing. I also told myself that asking without context would let him turn the story into a misunderstanding. In the afternoon, I opened a blank note and began to build a quiet ledger. I wrote dates I remembered. I wrote the names of restaurants from the thread. I wrote locations I could check. I did not write adjectives. After work, I bought groceries and cooked as if salt could hold a room together. I put my phone on the counter and waited for a clean moment. It did not arrive. He was funny and kind. He told a story about a coworker who always misplaces his badge. He praised the dinner and did the dishes without being asked. These are the kinds of details that make a person want to return the phone to the table and return to a life that asks for less courage. That night, I slept badly. I woke at 2 with heat in my chest and decided to breathe through it, which sometimes works. This time it did not. The next day, I stayed late at the office and checked my bank app against his, which we both keep open for shared bills. The numbers were ordinary. The receipts I could see were ordinary. The ordinary did not help. The day after that, I went to a cafe that sat 2 doors down from a hotel lobby mentioned in the messages. I ordered tea and pretended to read. I did not see him. I did see the rhythm of strangers in a lobby that has never learned the names of the people who cross it. I walked home feeling both foolish and steadier. Back at the apartment, I opened the note again and added times and places that now felt like coordinates. Trust is not a building that collapses in one loud second. It is a line of tiny cracks that you refuse to see until the light comes through them. On Friday night, he set his phone on the dresser and left for a run. The phone buzzed. Another message appeared from the same thread. The preview used a word that belonged to couples who believe they are alone in the world. I chose not to open it. I chose to take a picture of the screen instead and email it to myself. Then I placed the phone exactly where it had been. When he returned, he stretched and asked about dinner. I said I was not hungry. He looked at me for one long second as if he could hear a sound that was not in the room. Then he went to shower and the steam filled the apartment with a fog that made everything look softer than it was. I stood in the hallway and chose a sentence. I decided to say it tomorrow. We sat on the couch with the invisible prosecutor between us. I told him what I had seen using plain language. I did not accuse. I did not perform rage. I described the messages and the dates that lined up with our plans. He tried to interrupt and then he did not. He said he had wanted to tell me and had not known how. He said he had been lonely inside a life that looked complete. He said he had been looking for a version of himself he thought he had misplaced. I asked when the messages started. I asked how often they met in person. I asked if there had been rooms or only screens. He said the messages began during a long work project last winter. He said there had been dinners. He said there had not been anything he would name as an affair. And then he stopped speaking. Because we both understood that definition is a tool people use when they want to keep something they like without calling it what it island, I asked who she was. He said she was someone who understood his industry. He said the connection felt easy. He said he had not meant to build another life inside ours. I said meaning does not erase impact. My voice shook on the last word and I let it. The cat jumped onto the arm of the couch and settled between us like a witness who refuses to testify. He said we could go to counseling. He said he could block the number. He said he could hand over his phone at the end of every day. He said many things that sounded like a plan and also like a plea. I said I needed air. I walked to the river and stood at the railing and felt the wind try to make decisions for me. I went home and made tea and told him we would try counseling. He agreed with relief that sounded like a person who has been allowed to keep something valuable for one more day. We found a counselor on a quiet street where the reception area smelled like mint. We sat in 2 chairs that had learned the weight of many versions of us. The counselor asked for a timeline and then asked for accountability that used numbers and not adjectives. He handed over his phone without flinching for a week and then for a second week. He grew irritated when I asked to see it in the 3rd week, a human reminder that compliance and change are not the same action. I felt myself harden into a guard, and I hated that shape. I wanted to be a person whose home did not need checking. I told the counselor that out loud. The counselor nodded and asked him to describe what boundaries he could hold without me patrolling them. He said he could delete the thread and block the contact and stop using any device that did not live in plain sight. He did those things. The room still held the old air. I felt both grateful and unsteady. Progress was a staircase with shallow steps. Falling apart is slow until it is not. 2 months passed and the messages did not return. He planned dates and cooked. He showed me his calendar without being asked. Yet a sense of performance hovered, as if he were playing the role of redeemed man and I were playing the role of patient woman. One evening he told a story about a colleague that I had heard before, but he used a new detail that matched the voice from the thread. It was small, and I might have missed it if I were not already listening for echoes. I did not confront him. I asked myself whether I wanted my life to be a courtroom. The answer was no. I began to plan for both possible futures. I updated my resume. I looked over my budget and checked that it could stand on its own. I found a spare key and moved it to a place only I knew. I set reminders to call friends I had neglected. I sat in counseling and said that trust felt like a bridge that had been tested by a weight it was not built to bear. The counselor asked what I would need in order to step onto it again. I said I would need evidence that did not rely on inspection. He said he would write me letters every week. I said letters are tender and also not proof. He said he would attend a group for people learning to tell the truth when it is hard. He went twice, then work got busy and the meetings faded. The day I decided I was done came without fireworks. He had left for a run. I was cleaning the kitchen and I knocked a notebook off the counter. A card fell out. It was a loyalty card for a cafe I had never visited. 7 stamps waited for the 8th. On the back was a small note written in his careful print that said her name, and a day of the week, and a time just after the hour. I did not need anything else. When he returned, I was calm in a way that scared me a little. I told him I was moving out for a while. He said this was a mistake. He said we were so close. He said he loved me. I said the bridge did not hold. I packed a bag with quiet hands. I took the cat carrier out of the closet, and the cat walked into it without drama, as if she had been rehearsing. I closed the door gently. I left the key on the table because I did not want a story about theft. I checked into a small sublet found through a friend. I texted him the address so he could send mail I had missed. Then I turned the phone face down and made tea and let the room show me how it sounded when it belonged to me alone. After comes quietly. The first week I woke before dawn and lay still so my thoughts could exhaust themselves. I went to work and did not bring my private fire to the office. I cooked simple food and ate it slowly. I called my mother and told her the short version. She offered to bring soup, which is how my family tries to fix time. Noor came over with flowers and a willingness to talk about anything except the story that had broken my room open. In counseling, I practiced sentences that began with I and ended with a plan. He sent messages that alternated between apology and hope. I answered briefly and with care. He asked if we could try again after a pause. I said a pause is not a tool that repairs trust. I said I wished him well. I did not add anything else. On a Saturday, I walked by the river and thought about how often the water changes while still being the river. I realized that my life was like that now. Same banks, different water. A month later, I signed a lease on a small apartment with a single bright window. I moved in with 2 friends and 1 plant. I bought a lamp that makes evening feel like a decision. I joined a class after work and listened to a teacher who loved her subject more than her reflection. I slept like a person who had laid something heavy down. There were hours when sadness arrived and sat with me like a patient relative. I made tea and let it stay until it left. One afternoon, he sent a final message. He said he had learned many lessons. He said he was grateful for the time we had. He said he hoped I had found peace. I wrote back 1 sentence. I said I had found steadiness. Then I archived the thread. I did not delete it. I did not need to. The messages I had not been meant to see had rewritten the map of my life. I did not hate that map. It led me to a place where my time is mine, my answers are mine, and my phone rings for plans that I chose to make. On a quiet night, I sat by the window and watched the city settle. I felt the cat step onto my lap like a soft vote of confidence. I thought of the first message I read, and I thought of the last one I sent. Between them, there was pain and there was proof, and there was a bridge that did not hold. There was also a new road, and I am on it now, steady and moving.